Ahoy Pirates! Welcome back to the Live Your Ikigai podcast. Today we are talking with Victor, a good friend of mine and founder of a travel company, as well as his successful journey to get a business visa in Japan and how you can do so too. Please find all the timestamps in the description for the startup visa, the business management visa, and a digital nomad visa for Japan. So, welcome, Victor. How are you doing? Are you feeling relaxed in this beautiful Japanese cafe?
Thank you. Yes, very much so. Hard not to. It's a beautiful, beautiful space, by all accounts.
Can you tell us about your background and how you first started living and working in Japan? Fun story. We used to live together, right?
Yeah, indeed we did. I think arguably you were my first friend in Japan since that first night of just chatting shit back home at the share house. So for me, my background is I'm from Denmark. I have a master's degree in software engineering from University of Southern Denmark, and I moved to Japan a bit more than a year ago at this point on the startup visa with my startup Trip.com company that I founded back home in Denmark with a group of friends that I met at university, most of them. So that's kind of how this all came to be.
It's the t-shirt you're wearing, right?
Yeah, it is. tryp.com, Trip.com. That's the name of the company.
Today we are going to talk about your successful business visa application in Japan and your company, Trip.com. Can you first tell us about how you got involved with this company and living in Japan, as well as what they do?
Yeah, so, to try and make a really, at this point, long story short, when I was doing my master's degree, my home university, University of Southern Denmark, had and still have a what at the time was called a talent program in entrepreneurship, so an extracurricular program for students that are interested in starting their own startup, kind of teaching you the A to Z of going from ideation to incorporated business entity and raising funding and all that jazz. And during the first weekend of the talent program, they had some alumni from previous generations pitching their ideas and kind of telling where their companies are now. And one of those alumni was my now CEO and co-founder, Andre, who told us about a company at the time named Travel Bunny, which is it's Travel Bunny, no less, which supposedly is a really good name in Chinese, because we were mainly targeting the Chinese market back then. And I think it has alliteration in Chinese, but I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But that is how I met Andre, and that's immediately after his pitch. I went up to him and I told him I love the idea. I feel like I can contribute to the vision that you are trying to achieve here. And the funny thing is, the business developer who runs the talent program had, before inviting Andre, told him there's this guy amongst this batch of talents, quote unquote, that I think you should go talk to afterwards. I think he might actually have something to contribute, and that was me. So he was looking for me too. So it's yeah, I know, right? Exactly. We got heavily matched made by dear Andrea was and is her name. Yeah. So what was the rest of the question? That was me rambling.
So yeah, how you got involved, you explained it, and also how you actually end up living here in Japan.
Yes. So the story of me in Japan is a bit longer. I think, like many other of us 90s kids, it begins with an early exposure to a lot of Japanese pop culture in the form of both manga and anime, at least as a Northern European person. So I'd known for a while that I wanted to live in Japan. And with Trip.com, we reached a point where, so our company is born full remote, and then we had a year in Denmark living together at my university accelerator program. And that reached an end. So we were losing our office in Denmark and kind of our reason to be there, because we're not a fully Danish founding team. We're 4 Portuguese and 2 Danes, and all of us have kind of not a need, but a heavy drive to travel. That's why we started this company in the first place, right? So we were at a point where people were kind of dispersing again. We were going back to being a fully remote company. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe this is the time to try and make this Japan thing happen. And yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, this is something I really want to do. I don't really have any reason to stay where I am right now, so why not now? So I wanted to do that on the working holiday visa, because that's easiest visa to get for us, for countries that have that program and that collaboration with Japan. What ended up happening was at a tech conference, I guess Denmark's biggest tech conference, Tech Barbecue, in September 2022, I would bump into an organization that was at the time called Startup City Sapporo. These days they're called Startup Hokkaido, a more fitting name because their activities encompass the entirety of our beautiful home island here. And they were on the lookout for startups, very specifically Nordic travel tech startups that were looking to move or expand to Japan. And that was just the perfect storm, like that, because before the setup with the working holiday visa would kind of be me going to Japan, but kind of with some level of disadvantage to Trip.com, like as a company. It would mainly just be me moving to a very annoying time zone to be in just for the sake of doing it. Where all of a sudden, on a silver platter, I get this chance to, well, what if you go there, but actually do it with the expansion of your company in mind and the growth of your company in mind, and you get government support. We help get you started, get you over here, and kind of help you hit the ground running in terms of expanding your business in Japan. So I jumped on that immediately, and I think it was no less than 4 months later, I arrived in Sapporo for the first inaugural Tech Barbecue Sapporo back at the start of 2023. We just had the second one a couple of weeks ago, so things are growing and happening here. But back then, this entire entrepreneurship wave and Hokkaido's government betting very heavily on that was really new. So I got to be a part of kind of the first wave of incoming international startups that want to expand in Japan, and in our case, East Asia in general. As I mentioned originally, we had a Chinese name because we wanted to start in the East Asian market. So yeah, no, perfect storm. I got very lucky there.
Yeah. So did Trip.com provide you with your first visa from overseas, or how did you got the first visa? Because I do know you did 2 different applications, right?
I did. So my very first visa was the startup visa. It's variation 44 of the designated activities visa. It's a visa that throughout the last kind of 3-4 years has gotten a lot of revamps from the Japanese government. It used to be a not all that horrendously attractive visa to have. And that has changed massively so, and it will change this year as well for the even better as a part of the Japanese government betting quite heavily on entrepreneurship, both local and foreign entrepreneurship, as a part of revitalizing the Japanese economy. So that first visa, the startup visa, I got it's built on the basis of Trip.com already being an existing company, but the visa is given by the government. So it's whichever kind of government body that manages the startup visa program in the prefecture you're in will be the one deciding ultimately if you get it or not. And that's the first one I got. So the startup visa, the requirements at the time where I applied, and I think they still stand, is pretty much that you need to have an idea at a bare minimum, and an idea where you have the minimum viable product. So you need to be at the MVP stage where you can prove that this thing you say you want to do, you're actually capable of doing. Then on top of that, you need and this is where the 2 visas I've applied for kind of interlink, you need to prove or provide a roadmap, very specifically also a financial roadmap to you going from the stage where your idea/company is right now to it being able to qualify you for a business manager visa. So the requirement gap kind of between the startup visa and the business manager visa can seem quite large, and you need to prove that you can close that gap within the time frame of the startup visa. In my case, the startup visa was a 2 times 6 month visa. In April, rumor has it will become a 2-year visa, which is a more reasonable time frame for sure, and a important change that they're making to it. So very happy to see them do that. Yeah, and aside from that, like when you apply, you do have to, like it's Japan, so you're going to supply a lot of paperwork. You're going to do a lot of application writing and a lot of bureaucracy. Like no matter, even like Hokkaido's implementation of it was revolutionary enough, and I, not even being sarcastic, because it was a big deal at the time and still is, that I could apply completely in English and online. No other prefecture was doing that at the time. I don't know if any of the other prefectures have caught up, but a part of Hokkaido's big gamble on this was actually making an online and in English application form for you to apply for this visa. So you don't have to hire a visa lawyer to get through the process. It was a big enough deal that I actually did a newspaper interview already before moving here with the Hokkaido Shimbun, just asking me about, man, what was it like applying in English? Like, because they, like, obviously they wanted the story that it really affected my choice, and I guess arguably it did, but what also affected it was the startup Hokkaido team and the clear passion like coming out of them. But yeah, so it's a big deal that you could apply in English. But yeah, you also need to have a business plan that in some way involves Japan and like the strengthening of the prefecture you're going to. Like, it needs to be clear that bringing you in as an entrepreneur is going to be advantageous in the long run, not just to the country, but to the prefecture itself you're going into. So in our case, the angle was obviously around tourism, about bringing more people to more of Japan, and specifically bringing more people to Hokkaido and to go see more of Hokkaido. So that was kind of the qualifying for the startup visa part. So for me, being qualified to apply for the startup visa very much came from the fact that we already had as established of a company and as a footing that you can have as a startup. Like, we were a registered legal entity in Denmark. We're already generating revenue and all of that stuff. So we were a somewhat like safe case, to the extent that startups are safe cases, right? Yeah, so the second visa that I've recently applied for and is being processed right now is the business manager visa. So the timeline for the startup visa and the end game of the startup visa is that you eventually transition into the business manager visa. It's the only visa the startup visa can turn into, like aside from a spouse visa, if you should be so lucky. But yeah, so you must transition into the business manager visa at the end of your startup visa journey. That's also why you need to be able to close this kind of requirement gap within a year and prove you have a plan for that. The business manager visa is a different visa for sure. It hasn't had the overhauls that we've seen the startup visa get, at least not yet. Kind of hoping they will get that. Yeah. I'm hoping it would match kind of the initiatives that we've seen from the government so far, but obviously that's just me hoping. But what you need for the business manager visa, you need a registered Japanese corporate entity that needs to be either a Godo Kaisha, which is a limited liability company, or a KK. I've forgotten what that stands for, except the second K is Kaisha as well. That's company in Japanese, but that's a shareholder company. So you need one of those two things, and you need to be registered as a director of that company. Aside from that legal entity, that company needs to have at least 5 million yen in capital, or it needs to employ 2 Japanese locals. It's one of the two, at least at the time of my application. Mind you, these things change quite a lot, and there's a lot happening around these visas, as I've mentioned, so it might change. Your mileage may vary. But for me, at least, 5 million yen in capital registered in the company, or having 2 employees that are local employed. And then finally, you need to have an office space. You must rent an office, and it must be a private office. Unfortunately, it's a cruel double standard that the government puts in the way of us internationals, because it is not a requirement for a Japanese company to have an office space. It's a requirement for them to have an address, but that address can simply be a mailbox. And there's a lot of services that do these, what they call virtual addresses. So there's just a mailbox that you can get your corporate mail in. But as a foreign entrepreneur, as a business manager visa holder, there must be a physical office. And they are very distrusting about this. So you need to submit pictures of this office, of the fact that you have a lock on your door, that you have a mailbox, that the walls go all the way up to the ceiling. Like they're really intense about the office part for some reason.
So it cannot just be a box somewhere. It has to be a designated space. So that actually brings me to my next question. Like, what were the pain points of the visa application for the second visa? Because so far, Japan just came out with the digital nomad visa, which now me realizing it's a bit similar to that business management visa. So yeah, please tell us about the pain points and how you overcome them maybe.
Yeah, so the pain points are like with anything that you try to do in Japan, it's the bureaucracy for the most part. There is, like, incorporating a company here is a lot of work, and it is unfortunately, even with the support of an organization like Startup Hokkaido, above most foreigners' pay grades, even if like good at Japanese, because not only is it like Japanese levels of bureaucracy, but it's also just stuff that you really cannot screw up because it will affect both your company, thus your livelihood, and also your visa. So what I did, and what most people over here have done, is throw money at the problem until it goes away. So hire a judicial scrivener to handle all of your paperwork for you. For the incorporation process. In Sapporo, you can get quite a lot of subsidies to cover your incorporation costs, and most scriveners over here can help you do the paperwork for those subsidies as well. So you can kind of pay them to also do the paperwork for the money that will eventually pay them. So in that sense, it was still quite laborious, honestly, but at least I knew it was getting done right. Other small things like getting a corporate bank account is really, really hard here. I've been super lucky that Startup Hokkaido has vouched for me big time and managed to get me an account. Like, there are some other startups over here that even with the kind of stamp of approval from Startup Hokkaido haven't managed to get a corporate bank account yet. And you can operate a business out of a personal bank account, that is allowed, but it just makes your finances so much more cluttered to manage. So that's another big one. And yeah, to the point of hiring a scrivener to do your business incorporation, we do have one company trying to do it on their own here. Like, it's one of them has lived here for quite a while and like is good at Japanese and everything, but they've had their application rejected no less than 3 times because there is just it's difficult. Like, it's really, really difficult legal work. Aside from that, obviously raising the 5 million yen, you do need to supply a plan for getting that money at the time of applying for the startup visa. But like, plans change, especially within a year in a startup or 2 years in the new format. So for me, that also ended up becoming a headache in its own right, as we kind of moved closer to the date where I needed to make my visa transitioning. We got it resolved and everything, but that also, like, in the grand scheme of things, 5 million yen is not a lot of money. Like, it's honestly one of the cheaper kind of, if you want to start a company somewhere, visas you can probably get. But for a startup, it is still a lot of money, at least for your average startup. And the same was the case for us. So that's some of the headaches. Then there's the business manager visa application itself, at least under the guidance of Startup Hokkaido, was actually peaceful enough. Like, you need to supply a lot of paperwork, but most of it is just paperwork proving that you have the office, that you have the money, and that you have the company. And then you need to supply kind of a financial projection where you show, oh yeah, this is going to be profitable by the end of the first year. One of the annoying parts, I haven't quite decided if I think it's fair or not. I guess it kind of is, but you only get 1 year initially, which can be a big hindrance in kind of operating your company here. But after the first year, because getting the business manager visa is like neither, like, the requirements are decently kind of clearly laid out. So getting that first year is doable if you can just live up to them. The extension gets tough because you need for your company to be both profitable, which can be a tall order for some startups depending on the domain you're in, but it also needs to be profitable by virtue of at least some percentage of Japanese clients. So even if you're running a mega successful startup that is super profitable, if you're not getting at least some of that revenue in from Japanese clients, immigration will tend to look at your extension application and go, great company, doesn't need to be here, out you go. And that's also something to keep in mind. Obviously, that that already needs to figure into your considerations at this point of like applying for the startup visa, because when you apply for that, you need to like kind of prove that the case belongs in Japan as well, because they are very, like, they're careful with people going for the startup visa as a means to just have a visa in Japan, and then just kind of forcing the startup angle to go live that dream. So you do already, like, at the start, like applying for the startup visa, that's a consideration you need to have. But it does become increasingly more relevant once the business manager visa is your way of life. And I guess that's where the digital nomad visa can be more interesting for like at least a short-term solution, because all of these requirements aren't there. Like most Japanese visas that exceed tourist visas and are easy to get, it does require you earning some measure of money, the digital nomad visa, but it does allow you to come here and just be here for 6 months and kind of mind your business, where the business manager visa, you can build a life here with that, but it's a tough visa to both get and an even tougher visa to maintain. And yeah, the 1 year at a time visa doesn't do you any favors, neither in terms of your kind of life here, day-to-day life here, or in terms of operating your company here in general. Like, it does put up some things, some barriers for you in terms of, like, let's say you wanted to take out a loan for your company. That can be really hard when you only have 1 year of visas on your 1 year left on your visa, like right from the get-go. So there are some things where it can feel a bit inherently like not competitive to run a company here as a foreign entrepreneur incoming, at least if you're not backed by a massive company, because you're already juggling all of this additional overhead, and starting a company in Japan will involve some additional overhead that you probably wouldn't find anywhere else, because they love their paperwork here. Things are just more intricate, and their stamps, yeah, important thing, get your business hanko and your bank hanko and your personal hanko to make all of these things happen as well. So it is just trickier already to have a company here. But I look at that part of the kind of burden and think, okay, you understand that coming in. But then having these kind of like arbitrary barriers added on top of that can feel a bit unnecessary. But it's part of the ride.
Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, shred the like button so more people can experience living in Japan. And how long did the whole process take? And do you get a residency card at the end? And if you have one, can you show me?
Yeah. So the startup visa for me, and the for me part is a little bit important in this context. It took around a month for the processing before I got my confirmation that I qualified for the startup visa and that I would get my COE, which is Certificate of Eligibility. So that's what you need to submit when you apply for the actual visa. But the footnote to that is that I was the first applicant for the kind of revamped startup visa back at the tail end of 2022. So I was also the only case they needed to process at the time. And they were very obviously aware of my case and kind of monitoring it quite closely, because I was the first one. So they also felt like they had a lot to learn from how things kind of ended up going, the entire flow of the process from me submitting to them, handing it off to the gov and everything. So it was a very hands-on experience. These days they have a lot more applicants. And another footnote is, back then COVID had just kind of ended in Japan. Like, Japan was shut down for a lot longer than many other countries were. So immigration wasn't as backed up with like processing different visas. Like, it had just started getting a bit heavier when I applied. So these days, application time is probably going to be slightly longer. So that was pretty fast process. It had to be, because we knew that we wanted to have me in Sapporo for Tech Barbecue Sapporo in January, and I applied kind of early October. So it was kind of like, all right, we need to be a bit snappy about this, but we can make it work. So we succeeded at that. The business manager visa, all things accounted for, it does take a lot of time, because you need to have your company incorporated and everything. I think it took like 3 months to get all of the paperwork in order. which and we ran into some complications with mine due to the financial situation and everything. So it was around kind of 3 months of work, and usually they should be able to process a business manager visa in like 1 to 2 months, as long as there's no like missing documentation. They can reach out to you and ask for you to provide more. I haven't heard anything at this point, and I've submitted mine like 3-ish weeks ago, which is usually a good sign, at least, that there's no documentation missing. So I should just get a hard acceptance or rejection at the end of the year. So at least I'll know, right? So yeah, BM visa is usually like from you hand it in, 1 to 2 months of waiting, where you just get an extension on your residency card. And like, I guess like up to 3 months of paperwork if you're just doing a standard opening a company here that you are the owner of and the director of and everything. Then you should be kind of okay. Especially, obviously, I'm cheating a bit because I had Startup Hokkaido's help, and that does just make a big difference because they know exactly what you need to submit. Like now I'm one of the first cases coming through, right? But they have people on the payroll that understand these processes quite like intimately and know which things can you screw up with, so where do we need to be like extra aware, so make sure that you actually qualify and get it on the first go. So in that sense, my life has always been made a lot easier by Startup Hokkaido backing me and helping me get through all of this. And finally, yes, true, we do get a residency card, both for the startup visa and also for the business manager visa. And you do get a fully fledged Japanese residency. I have it in here somewhere. Yeah, there he is. This one is technically expired, if not for the stamp on the back that marks it as being under processing for an extension.
Here's a list of what I had to consider organizing while living in Japan. For all these topics, you find videos on this YouTube channel. Finding housing, monthly costs and money breakdowns, what you need to know before coming, buying a car, translating my driver's license, good places to settle down for a while, unique experiences while connecting with locals, renting stuff, storing stuff, traveling around, events and festivals, and so much more. Who decides at the end of the process if you are eligible or not, and for how long is the visa at the end then?
So in both cases, it ultimately boils down to the immigration office, and that can feel a bit counterintuitive. For the startup visa, you do get kind of the approval you need to get the startup visa will come from whichever government entity is managing the startup visa program. So in my case, it was Startup Hokkaido providing me my COE. So that usually immigration just passes that through. So that's the one that's the most kind of in the hands of the relevant people, I find. For the business manager visa, that actually separates completely from Startup Hokkaido in my case, except they assist you in making the application. But ultimately, whether or not your company and your business case and what you're doing is viable as a business manager visa case will be up to the individual immigration agent on that given day, whoever ends up sitting with the application. And one of the issues with the business manager visa is that it does have a little bit of a lack of a framework. Like for a visa that has that much potential for being like a cornerstone in like recovering Japan's economy, it does feel a bit too much up to the whims of like the individual immigration agent who might not, like God bless them, be fully qualified to evaluate a business case. Like that feels like there should maybe be some business developers or experts that get to have a say in that. But right now it is very much just whoever is processing your case and how they feel about what you're looking at. And obviously if you live up to like the 2 or 3 like hard requirements. And that's one of the kind of scary things, because people on the business manager visa do tend to be people like gambling quite heavily on Japan and like wanting to do something here. And because of how short the visa is initially, so you get 1 year normally on the first application. unless you're applying to be a business manager of like a massive already existing like kind of post IPO company. Then you are only getting 1 year. So it's a lot of commitment for you to make to wanting to do something here, only for you to get 1 year if you're lucky that an immigration agent feels like your company sounds like it has potential. Then the kind of timeline after that, the way I understand it, like they evaluate your business and your application for the extensions based on how it's financially performing. And as I mentioned previously, also if you are actually doing business kind of in Japan and to the benefit of Japan. If you're doing, like the better you're doing, kind of the more years you can ask for. What I've been told for my timeline, at least how we expect it's going to look for my case, is that I'm going to get 1 year now. When I extend it, I will probably once again have to settle for 1 year. On the second extension, if things are going well, then we're probably looking at, at least I could try applying for free. Yeah, and that's kind of the timeline you're looking at. And one of the things where the business manager visa, for the level of commitment you need to kind of show and the level of ambition you inherently need to show to get it, the permanent residency timeline is exactly the same as pretty much any other visa. So it's still a 10-year permanent residency timeline. And on one hand, I understand that it has to be that way, and on another, it frustrates me because, let's say I hadn't chosen like the startup journey, but still chosen to go live in Japan. What I would have probably, with my background, have been able to do is live here on a specialist visa due to my master's degree in software engineering. And on the specialist visa, my permanent residency timeline would be 5 years. Now I'm here starting a company doing exactly what I would have been doing, to some extent at least, but in my own company. So contributing to the economy and growth of the country in a very different way. And it's a 10-year timeline. And that can also feel a bit daunting and a bit like, I'm not sure they want me here. like it's, thank you. And I want to be here. And I think that's the power that Japan still has on at least a lot of us. Like we get enchanted by the place and want to be here. And that makes us put up with all of this. And I am, like, this can all sound very ungrateful. I am so fucking grateful for the chance I've gotten here. I realize I'm in a position that a lot of people would do a lot to be in. The fact that Startup Hokkaido took me in and have given me the attention and the help and the support that they have to live not just my dream, but kind of an elevated version of my dream I didn't even know I could, where I both get to bring my company over here and be here. Like I am in a really, really fortunate position. So I don't want to come off as too like complainy about the entire nature of it all. But I think for people that maybe don't have that level of luck and fortune, but still want to pursue like having a company and building a life here, or even like just for companies considering, like medium-sized companies or small to medium-sized companies considering expanding here, the business manager visa and the nature of how you get it and kind of the instability of it can be like something that scares people off and scares money away from Japan and scares passionate souls away from Japan and creative and driven people, because it does feel like a gamble, more so than like starting your own business will always be a gamble, but more so than it should be. It does feel like something that the government would benefit from rewarding a bit more and encouraging a bit more, because Japan's economy has been flatlining at best for a really long time. And the core changes that, from my perspective, need to happen to fix that do need to come from inside. It is like something that Japan and the Japanese people need to decide and push for change in terms of. But I think starting that change and sparking that conversation, a lot of good could come from allowing more foreign entrepreneurs to come in here and to try their luck here and to try building something cool here, and not necessarily showing the way, but at least showing a way to like the existing companies here, and serve as an inspiration and as new revenue streams as well for the country. And in that sense, the business manager visa sometimes seems like a really silly level of a blocker for a visa that really could be the beginning of something really cool, especially with how strong the startup visa is now. Because the startup visa journey has to end with the business manager visa. And now you've made what I actually think is a great visa, the startup visa. And then to me, it makes sense that the visa that follows needs to be like ready to like lift you to the next level and really like get you going and get you contributing. So yeah, that I'm not even sure where this ramble started, but that's kind of it.
No, that's great, because actually I wanted to ask you, would you recommend this visa to others? And could you give any good tips and advice? And you just gave that, so you answered completely that question. That's great. But in just maybe one sentence, why should more people apply for this business management visa? What do you think?
I think at least more people should try out the startup visa because of how strong it has gotten. I think Japan is a fascinating market because of this entire Galapagos syndrome thing they have going on here, where they have like on their own like volition had a very close country for a very long time, and that mindset still kind of exists, where there's some ideas and some things we take for granted in the West that either straight up hasn't made it here or have been implemented in a kind of different way here. So it's a super fascinating market to kind of ideate around and to enter. It's also, even though, as I said, the GDP has like been decently flat for a long time, it is still a massive economy, and it's a very, very stable country to operate an East Asian expansion out of. Like if you're thinking like more like the location of the country itself, like there is a lot of strong emerging economies in Southeast Asia close by. Like you obviously have China and Korea as the immediate neighbors. So I think there's a lot of business incitament to being in Japan, especially as the tendencies are kind of showing that the Japanese government are making moves towards bringing in more of foreign entrepreneurs. I mean, the other thing is, if you're like me and like you want to be here, like I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to make those two ends meet and go, well, not only do I want to be here, but there is a strong business case for my company here. But I think it's a country where if you have the love for both what you do, but also for Japan to kind of just fight through all the bureaucracy and all the extra operational overhead, and you have a business case that does benefit from being here, then I think it's absolutely worth it. Now, so that's for the startup visa, because the startup visa, you often have a really strong support system from the given prefecture. I can only vouch for Hokkaido having, in my opinion, the best one, but I hear good things about Fukuoka and Hokkaido. Let's go. Both Fukuoka and Aichi prefecture as well I'm hearing good things. Kobe too. So there's a lot of actually like prefectures betting quite heavily on the startup visa as a way to strengthen their local economy. For the business manager visa, if you're coming in here as a startupper and you're kind of skipping the startup visa journey and going straight to the business manager visa, it is doable, but you're going on a tough journey. It's one you can solve by like throwing money at it, but you're gonna need to, a lot of the help I've gotten from the government, you're gonna have to buy, unless you happen to have a Japanese co-founder who understands like the kind of laws and regulations around these things really, really well. But if you are just coming in as a solo entrepreneur or as like still early stage or even kind of like Series A stage startup that doesn't have any roots or ties to Japan, it is a tough visa journey. It's tricky to get. It's relatively expensive to get still, because you need to pay for like the office and everything, and getting that when you don't already have the startup visa and kind of a government entity vouching for you amplifies that complexity, because now you're trying to like make both a company without having residency here, which you actually kind of can do, but also getting a lease on anything without a residency, even with a 1-year residency like the business manager visa, can actually be really tough. So I think that has helped a lot is just having like Startup Hokkaido both like vouch for me and help guide me through that. And without all of that, I'm not sure if I would have succeeded at it. So it's a completely different headache you're tackling going into a business manager visa without doing the startup visa journey first, unless your company really does have the resources to pay people to solve it. Which I do have some friends in kind of the ecosystem over here who have done, where they had a really strong kind of footing in their home countries and they had the financial means and felt like the business case was strong enough to like just solve it that way and skip the startup visa and all that stuff. And that's great, but I think for a lot of like startups, we are just inherently not swimming in cash. And in that case, the business not. That's the hope. That's what we're telling our investors. And in that case, the business manager visa does get tough. But I mean, in the spirit of entrepreneurship, like if you want it and if you feel like you can push through all of that, then by all means go for it. We'd be happy to have you here, especially in Hokkaido. Start your companies up here. It's the best place to do it.
If people want to follow you or your company, where can they go?
Yeah, so for our company, please do follow us on wherever you get your social media news feeds. We are on both Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, TikTok, and that's all under the name tryp.com, tryp.com. You can find us in there, see some of the things that we do. Our marketing team are quite fond of posting anything from straight up travel related content. Some of the deals our artificial intelligence generates and the occasional meme as well. So do check us out there. For me personally, like, should you be so inclined, then you can find me on LinkedIn, Victor Graham Thompson. I'll be the guy in the tryp.com hoodie in front of a Tech Barbecue Sapporo sign from my pitch competition participation back in 2023. I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have as well about our ecosystem up here and about the process that I went through to get here. I think that's about the rundown of it. Yeah, do check us out, tryp.com. I think we have a pretty goddamn cool and novel take on what traveling can be and how you can leverage the travel market to your advantage and see more for less, see more of the world.
Well, I will definitely link everything in the description so you can check that out. And then I do have one last question, and then I leave you to take it wherever you want to take it. What are your plans for the future in Japan? Maybe living near me again?
I would love nothing more than for you to stick around up here, but yeah, you're a tough one to pin down in one location for long. So my plans for the future in Japan, I mean, I have lots, I have loads. For now, it's just getting that good first year on the business manager visa so I can secure my extension around January next year. In the longer term, I mean, being here does spark a lot of ideas for companies and things you could do. But one thing, like, no matter like what my kind of, no matter what business I end up like being in, we still have a long way to go with tryp.com. So there's quite a few years on that journey left. But I want to keep being a part of growing the entrepreneurship scene up here in Hokkaido, keep bringing more startups here, but also making sure that more startups are created here by the locals and keep growing what we have here, because it's been incredible seeing the growth we've had just within the first year of me being here, completely unrelated, but just looking at where we were a year ago with me having just arrived, hosting the first ever Tech Barbecue Sapporo for like 150 people, a half-day event, to just a couple of weeks ago where we had Hokkaido Innovation Week, a full week event, kind of a bit longer than that even if you count all of the side events that kind of stretched on each side. It's crazy to see how much we've achieved up here just because there's so many people that care so much up here, and because we have the emphasis on community that we have, like, rather than just being a startup ecosystem, we've decided to be like a startup and entrepreneurship community where we really heavily emphasize this, like, helping each other grow. We pursue crazy goals and we fail together and we succeed together and we celebrate together. And I want to keep being a part of that also, like, more so than I've been able to due to the stress and novelty of it all the first year. So hopefully participate in and organize more events to put some spotlight on the scene up here, not just Trip.com, but also just all the other super cool startups that are here and the ones that are hopefully incoming, and the ones that I know are incoming as well from last week. So that's something I hope to pursue, and hopefully like just be able to build a stable life here. Like, it would be nice to not be on year-to-year visas. It does. I mean, it has its charm, but it would be nice to not constantly feel that clock ticking in the back of your head.
Thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it. This is amazing. I mean, we keep on meeting each other wherever and pursuing being friends. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for giving me a microphone. I tend to get a bit rambly, but I do hope that this can maybe help clarify some things for some people. It's still not the most well-covered visa trajectory out there, but I do think it's one that will get increasingly more attractive, and that I think a lot of people might enjoy if they have that spark of good crazy that guides people into entrepreneurship. So I'm super happy that you're putting some information out there. I'm glad I could help with that.
Okay, pirates and fellow nomads, this is the end of the interview with Victor. If you enjoyed the info, shred the like button. And if this interview is helpful for you, a subscribe would mean the world to me in finding my real audience. Please find all the links in the description. Check out more videos about the nomad lifestyle and how to organize living or traveling in Japan on this channel. See you in the next one. Cheers and live your Ikigai.